This is Countdown to Kickoff, where we show you games, players, or teams in program history on the road to opening kickoff. Next on the list, number 1, Sammy Parker, Noah Sewell, Jordan Burch, and Darren Thomas. Sammy Parker came to Oregon from Long Beach Polytechnic, a school that produced a pipeline of elite football talent. At Oregon, Parker was pure speed, a track star in pads who doubled on the Ducks track team in the spring and terrorizing defenses on Saturdays in the fall. Early on, Parker formed a dangerous tandem with Keenan Howry. Howry being the precise route runner who moved the chains, and Parker, who was the burner who stretched defenses and broke them in a single play. From 2000 to 2003, Parker steadily climbed the depth chart before exploding onto the scene as a senior, with 77 catches for 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns, including a monster 16-catch, 200-yard Fiesta Bowl performance in 2002 against Colorado that helped cap Oregon's historic 11-1 season. By the time he left, Parker had set Oregon's all-time record for receptions at 178, finishing top 3 in yards and touchdowns. He was drafted in the 4th round by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 2004 draft and is now on Deshaun Jackson's inaugural staff at Delaware State as wide receivers coach. Noah followed his brother Penny's footsteps to Oregon, but was a 5-star force in his own right. A linebacker from Utah, he arrived in 2020 and immediately led the Ducks in tackles during the pandemic-shortened season, earning Pac-12 Defensive Freshman of the Year. Sewell wasn't just finesse, he was raw power, with sideline-to-sideline speed, a downhill thumper who reset the tone of Oregon's defense. Across 3 seasons, Sewell piled up 224 tackles, 29 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks, 5 interceptions, and 5 forced fumbles, collecting first-team All-Pac-12 honors in 2021 and second-team in 2022. Oregon had long been defined by linebackers like Wesley Mallard, Anthony Trucks, Kevin Mitchell, and Peter Sermon, and Sewell carried that lineage into the 2020s as their next enforcer. He was drafted in the 5th round by the Chicago Bears in the 2023 NFL Draft. Jordan Burch arrived at Oregon in 2023 as a transfer from South Carolina and one of the highest-rated recruits in Gamecocks history, and he chose to finish his college career in Eugene. Over 2 seasons with the Ducks, he logged 70 tackles, 13 for loss, and 7.5 sacks, proving himself as a disruptive force on the defensive line. His senior year in 2024, he went full beast mode, earning 3rd-team All-Big Ten honors from both coaches and media. And in a dominant game against Michigan State, he racked up 2.5 sacks and a fumble recovery, earning Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week and Reese's Senior Bowl Co-Defensive Player of the Week and Shrine Bowl Breakout Defensive Player of the Week as well. Burch put together an amazing senior season despite missing 4 games due to injury, allowing him to be drafted in the 3rd round by the Arizona Cardinals in the 2025 draft, and is in his rookie season currently.
38 seconds, and Thomas takes the snap, and the field is rushed by players, and the fans want to come out but won't be able to, but they'll celebrate in the stands as the team heads down to the end zone, and fans everywhere. 114 years they've waited. 10 seconds on the clock. And Oregon is going to play in the national championship game.
The man that escorted Oregon to its first national championship appearance, Darren Thomas, was the calm, cool, and collected player that broke multiple glass ceilings for Oregon as a program. In his freshman debut, he nearly stole the show with the furious 4th-quarter comeback against Boise State that the Ducks still ultimately lost, throwing for over 210 yards and 3 touchdowns before ever being named the starter. He took command in 2010, throwing for 2,800 yards and 30 touchdowns, earning 2nd-team All-Pac-10 honors and Oregon's Most Outstanding Player award, as the field general led Oregon to their first BCS national championship game versus Auburn. In 2011, he raised the bar again with 2,700 yards and a school record 33 touchdowns, and he led the Ducks to their first Rose Bowl win in 95 years over Wisconsin, where he went 17 for 23 for 268 yards and 3 touchdowns. Across 2 seasons as a starter, Thomas went 24-3, one of the best winning marks in Oregon quarterback history, comparable to Joey Harrington's.
Foot race to their sideline. Touchdown, Oregon!
Ladies and gentlemen, children of all wages, welcome back to the show. It is one day until kickoff, the opening kickoff for the Oregon Ducks season. Now, this episode is probably going to be a little short. There's also a reason why it's not live. I am having some back spasms, and I am saving up my energy to cover some high school football games that in a couple hours I will have to be at, because I am busy. Football season is not only busy as a fan, but as a person working. So football season, I cover and shoot games and put it on television. So it's a busy time. So it would be nice. That's why I haven't been able to go to many games recently and travel from San Diego to Eugene. But it would be nice one of these days to maybe try to make one up there, even during football, during the busy time for me. I try to catch a overnight plane or train ride or something, because I'm not a very good flyer. But that's right. It is one day until kickoff. And tomorrow is the opening kickoff for the 2025 season Oregon Ducks. And expectations are high, but regulated, I think. Because, again, there are some known knowns, some unknown knowns, some known unknowns, and some unknown unknowns on this team. Again, I know people are sort of freaking out about the quarterback competition. I think that it's probably decided who's the starter. But, again, Lanning keeps that stuff close to the chest from the beginning anyway. This was never really a thing to start. But we're going to preview the game here, because who they're playing is Montana State. By the way, shout out to the homie, Shay, my best friend of about, 20-something years now at this point, over 20 years. Got to support your homies, Six Pack Skateboards. Find him on Instagram and order a deck, a koozie, a shirt, whatever, all sorts of merch, sunglasses. I have a pair. I just don't have them with me. Support the homies. Support your local skate shop, too. So let's preview Montana State and Oregon this game. So I think this year's a little different in many ways. So obviously we have all the unknown talent on Oregon's squad, because we have new faces and a lot of old faces left. So there's going to be questions on what they will look like on the field. And, of course, we've heard great things about Brandon Finney Jr. at fall camp, which when I first heard about him being recruited or committing to Oregon, I looked at some of his high school film tape that was used as recruiting materials, and I got to say I was pretty impressed. Again, as a former DB myself, not necessarily at that level, but again, you learn the same things. It's just a talent gap, and I, of course, am on the bottom of that talent gap. But nonetheless, he looked good. He had a good economy of foot movement, in the sense of like a receiver, no false steps, no extra movements. You make your cuts, you make your moves, boom, done, go. And so his ability as someone at his size, so to speak, because again, we've sort of crossed the Rubicon of the 5'9" DBs. The day of the 5'9" DBs are over. And that was obviously exposed in the Rose Bowl for the Ducks last year. We were not only not athletic enough for guys like Jeremiah Smith and Mbuka, even though they played very well in the regular season game against Ohio State, it's a completely different beast in the postseason. And that gas pedal was turned on for Ohio State. They had a chip on their shoulder. They had just lost to Michigan, and they ran through Tennessee. They were on a roll. They were on a heater again, which is why it's important to get hot in the postseason. But gone are the days of the 5'9" DB. So Finney is about 6'2", and fast, and that's exactly what you need. But you also need those big guys, because sometimes if you have a certain size, you can sacrifice speed for that. A lot of the reason why those littler guys back in the day were DBs was because they weren't big enough to be receivers, but they were fast enough to keep up with those receivers. Nowadays, though, you have to have a match. You have to have the size and the speed. And Finney had that. And so it's nice to see that he's sort of living up to the hype, which it's not like there was a whole lot of hype surrounding him. There should have maybe been more. He was just under the radar, and that's fine. That's the perfect place to be sometimes. And you let your play and your action show on the field. Now, it's obviously different with live game snaps, even against an FCS school, but I think he could probably do the trick among some of the other young guys. And I think what's perfect with Montana State is, one, yes, they're an FCS school, and usually FBS schools run all over the FCS schools. Now, I think just like we're seeing because of NIL and things like that, again, another thing to discuss later with the number guy, and you know who that is if you've seen a previous episode, my dad. Just like in FBS Division I, you are seeing a little bit more parity in, and not PARODY, but parity, sort of even playing field with SEC schools versus let's say what the Pac-12 used to be, or just lower tier conferences. It's starting to equalize out a little bit. There's still separation there because you already had those established blue bloods. They're always going to recruit very well, and most guys being recruited are going to say, yeah, I want to play for an SEC school. Even if it's a team like Kentucky or Vanderbilt, you're still in the SEC. So you're playing against, admittedly, sort of the best competition. Same with Big Ten, though. And Big Ten kind of has caught up with the SEC, where there's a really strong group of teams, some teams not so strong, and some teams bad, but the competition at the middle and top is strong, just like the SEC. So you're sort of seeing that, though, I think, between FCS and FBS, because now, you had those teams like Appalachian State that took down Michigan in 2007. I think you had some other people doing other FCS schools pulling off big upsets. I just can't remember off the top of my head. And last year too, you had North Dakota State being pretty competitive with Colorado, and according to the box score and the final score, you had Idaho last year being pretty competitive with Oregon, and that put a scare in a lot of Oregon fans, myself included, and a lot of people. We still trusted things, but that was still kind of scary that Idaho had only lost by 10 points, and they're a top tier FCS team. Don't get me wrong. So, but what you're seeing, though, I think, is those top tier FCS teams are just very, very smallly, incrementally, are getting much more competitive, and not that they're going to beat or be 500 or necessarily with these FBS teams, especially the FBS top tier teams, but they're good enough to put a scare into you. And 9 out of 10 times they'll probably lose, but there's that 1 out of 10 time where it can happen. So I think we're seeing that. And just like Idaho and North Dakota State and those other FCS teams and Sac State is another one that is kind of an honorable mention because it was sort of too long ago to be relevant to today, but they upset Oregon State at Reser at one point. But in the last couple years, the last year or two, they've been trying to make some money moves and bump themselves up into the FBS, and specifically, I think, try to get into the Pac-12, if not the Mountain West. But I think they're gunning for Pac-12, the new iteration of it. So, again, you have these FCS schools making big baller moves. And so I think you're going to see a little bit more competition from them. They're not going to get walked all over. They're not going to be an easy 70-point game anymore. So that's what we're seeing, though, with Montana State, who got a transfer quarterback from Stanford. What was his name? Jeremy Lamson? Let me double check here. Let me do a quick search. I think it's Jeremy. Yeah, Jeremy Lamson. No. It's a different guy. Hold on. Let me just put in, what's his name? Montana State starting quarterback. Justin Lamson. Okay, see, I got the J name mixed up. So Justin Lamson, though. He was a former Stanford quarterback. He didn't put up Andrew Luck numbers, but he was serviceable enough that he was a starting quarterback for Stanford. And again, he's not Andrew Luck, and Stanford is kind of in a low place right now as a program. But if you're competitive enough to be a starting quarterback in the FBS, and I guess now the ACC / former Pac-12 school, Stanford, you're not a pushover when it comes to playing for Montana State. And last year, Montana State was the national champion runner-up, I think behind North Dakota State. They've been very top tier in the Big Sky. This is like their 10th or 11th co-championship in a row. So they're not a pushover. And so I think this game can go either two ways. We could see an Idaho again or a Portland State again. And Portland State a few years ago got 81 put up on them by Oregon. Again, I'm not sure that's going to be what it's going to look like, but I think it'll either be a blowout or another scare. And we just kind of have to see. We just don't know what that's going to look like. The problem with last year, why it was such a scare, is we were pretty certain of our roster. We had a lot of returning players. We had Dylan Gabriel, who was sort of maybe not as good, but he was on the kind of in that same tier, if you will, the grouping of Bo Nix after Bo Nix had proved himself. So it was scary because it's like, whoa, I thought we had a national championship roster here. Like, people thought that. And or at least an extremely national championship competitive roster, and we barely got past Idaho. We had to open up the playbook a little more than we expected. But I don't necessarily, especially in this sort of situation, especially with the young, unproven team that we have, or that Oregon has, I kind of like that these FCS schools are going to give a little bit more of a pushback. And I'm not throwing any shade to my first alma mater, Portland State. I did go to school there for about a year. But I don't think it's nice and all to have kind of an exhibition game with beating down a team like Portland State. But I think that it's kind of decent to get a team on the FBS level that's a top tier team on the FCS level, kind of giving a little bit of pushback, enough to kind of poke holes and show a little bit more on film. Because when you beat a team 81-0, there's still plenty of things to see on film that you can change, get better, improve, things that you like, that you want to repeat, all sorts of things. But you have to get much more granular when you're watching film on a game where you won 81-0 versus a team that kind of gives you a little bit of pushback. So, like, for instance, if a guy like Jordan James runs it 80 yards on Portland State to a touchdown, you have to get really nitpicky to be like, hey, offensive line, that actually wasn't your assignment. Because with teams like that, you can kind of get away with that. With those higher competitive teams, you might not always get away with those certain things. And so you have to it'll be right in your face. Like, yo, you missed your assignment on there. Hey, you need to cut back on this. This is a cutback lane. You need to be watching for that. Hey, quarterback, this is what, this sort of defense looks like and what you should be doing when they show that. All sorts of things. So I kind of like that even with a tune-up game, or supposedly inferior or presumably inferior competition in an FCS school, you get the ones that are at least good enough to kind of poke holes in that to see. Because I think that will give us a good idea of the team, and it will give us a good idea of the team's sort of development. So you have a good idea of how the team itself as a whole is going to function, offense, defense, special teams, and kind of the game plan of things. But then also you kind of get to see, okay, this isn't practice anymore. Let's see how the young guys are in a live game. But then also let's see the young guys in a game where they get at least a little bit of pushback. And of course, it's still not going to be the same thing as in 5 weeks playing against Penn State. That's going to be, for this season so far, the ultimate pushback. But it's kind of nice at least that it's kind of like working out, You lift heavy, and you either have or you can have a recovery day, and then after that, you have a light exercise day, a light lifting day, or a cardio day, light cardio day. Or during your recovery days, you also do a light lifting day, whatever, You can't really, you want to make sure you're not falling asleep on those light workout days or recovery days. So let's say on the recovery day, if you don't have a planned out cheat day or something, you still stick to your diet. If you're doing a light resistance training day, you still do the same amount of reps, maybe just less weight or whatever, however you do things. But it's just sort of an illustration of being like, I'm still pushing myself, even if I'm not pushing myself to my absolute limits, because even against a team like that, it's still different than practice. So that's what we're going to see. I think the keys that we want to see here is basically the new front seven. Now, with guys like Amari Washington, Elijah Rushing, Tatum Tuioti, we've seen them before because of the platooning sort of structure of Oregon's defensive line. They like to, they saw, a decent amount of snaps. They're not like, whoa, I'm so new to this, playing in a real game. That's crazy. Like they've seen some stuff, so they're not completely green. I think the biggest question mark at this point, though, is not guys like Amari Washington or Elijah Rushing, Aiden Breland, those type of guys. I think the big question is going to be Bear Alexander. And it's not necessarily, again, this is sort of a broken record. Everyone's saying this, but it's just sort of painting the picture here. Bear Alexander always sort of got in his own way, obviously. So it's all a mental game. He has basically all the talent in the world, and it seems like he's taking things very seriously this time around with Oregon. And I know people were a little skeptical. That skepticism is justified and warranted. There's still a little tinge in the back of your head, especially because it's like, here's the thing. If Dan Lanning can't get this guy on board, then no one can. And it was sort of the same thing with Kirby Smart. But again, you kind of don't know yet how different Dan Lanning might be in his approach than Kirby Smart, where who knows, maybe Dan Lanning's more successful. We'll see. We will see. And the thing is, though, is like, I don't know if we're going to see that yet. I think we'll see a good game from Bear. But again, I think for him, it was always when the going gets tough, do you get tougher? And so we got to see as the schedule gets tougher. I know it's sort of a not super tough schedule this year, but we can talk about that later. When the schedule gets tougher, will he get tougher? And it seems like he's in a good mindset. Seems like he's having a decent camp. He's gotten into crazy good shape. So now only time will tell. So that's the big question. The next big question seems to be the linebackers, but the linebackers, that question seems to get answered more by the day. Mixon is apparently making waves just like Finney at fall camp, and we got Bryce Betcher and Devon Jackson on the other sides of the linebacking core. So those previous questions, I think, about linebackers, especially after last season ended, before it was decided whether Betcher would come back. But even if not, it seems like those questions are starting to go away the closer we get to the season. Actually, what was once maybe a weaker spot in the roster or in the lineup might be one of the strengths now. So that's good. That's good news. And now the rest is with the secondary. Unfortunately, Trey McNutt is going to be out. He's going to be out for a while. But it's next man up mentality. You always got to have that mentality. The backups, even if they're backups and they never see a snap when the starters are in, you got to be ready to play because you never know. One play can change it all. But Oregon has sort of spent time building that depth in the secondary. And guys like Finney, I think Iffy, Obadewu, and I forgot the other guy, but there's guys making waves. I think Peyton Woodyard. There's guys making waves in the secondary. They seem like they're the real deal. Naeem Offord. They seem like they're the real deal. And they're obviously, as Dan Lanning said in a press conference last week, young guys are going to see some playing time. And he said before, if you're good enough to play, you're going to play. So that's good news on that. And Jaleel Florence coming back add some veteran depth to that safety group where he can be sort of that leader of hopefully the new D-boys. So we'll see, though. That's going to be the test. We're going to see how they're going to play in a live game, and it's going to take some time for them to gel just as much as everything else. And that was sort of the big thing with Idaho last year was you had an offensive line, and this is sort of the downside of transfers. You can get them in their head and on paper to be like, I know the playbook, and they have the playbook down in practice, and they're gelling enough with the other offensive linemen, but it's just different when the game hits, and it's a personnel thing. Sometimes one player in this position does better than the other in this position, and you got to flip them, and then it's fine, and then so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, that depth at offensive line hasn't quite reached the level that the other positions have yet, but obviously Dan Lanning and crew are working on it. And to go back to the secondary real quick, Verone McKinley III is has been hired by Oregon. I think he's recently out of the pros and he's returning to Oregon. One of the better secondary members of the sort of 2010 mid 2010s era, late 2010s era teams. So I think that's going to help him recruiting secondary as too. Welcome back, Verone McKinley. And going back to the offensive line, they still haven't quite brought back the depth yet, or haven't quite built that depth yet. And so that's going to be still a bit of a question. You got Bedford coming back, luckily. You got Poncho. So you have veteran status guys. The transfers that came in, they're all legit and veteran status. It's just going to be a matter of how well they gel. Because they will be blocking for Dante Moore and Mekhi Hughes. And Mekhi Hughes seems to be proven legit. So all he needs is these big boys up front to block for him. He's good. And of course, Dante Moore is a big question. I'm assuming he's likely the starter. Again, I understand the quarterback competition thing has made people sort of question it. But I wouldn't be surprised maybe if the game's a little out of reach, or they just kind of want to use this game as an opportunity to get Novosad more live snaps. I wouldn't be surprised if they split time, but I don't think it's necessarily a split time thing like Dennis Dixon and Brady Leaf did back in the day, because as we all know, if you have two quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. So you have to have a guy. And unfortunately, you have to choose a guy. So, but I think it's fine to have people continue to prove themselves, because again, what if Dante Moore doesn't play to the expectations? You got a guy that's ready to go after, and he might play to expectations or better, and it might work out in the end. So I do think it's good. I hope that is sort of a blowout, because you want to give guys like Novosad or Moga or those lower depth chart guys those reps. So there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. But still, though, Dante Moore has the taint of UCLA on him. Now, again, I grew up playing in organized sports and in the athletic sort of portion of the world or lifestyle. So there's always the no excuses thing. But again, there were things that were freshman mistakes that he fell prey to, and that obviously are things that he's hopefully worked on and is working on these past couple years, especially last year sitting behind Gabriel. But I think we will see a bigger jump off from where he was that we all thought he would be at UCLA, because he's in a more stable program. He's got guys that are focused on developing him, and the coaches are just way more involved. I mean, think about his issue or the talent around him. Sorry, I'm having trouble with my voice. God. You have at UCLA, he really had no star receivers. Well, at Oregon, he's got star receivers. I know it's not the group that we were all expecting with Evan Stewart being out, but he's got DeCorian Moore. Gary Bryant Jr. is coming back. He's definitely got more receiver power than he did at UCLA. Two, he had a game scheme from Chip Kelly that wasn't really designed for him. Now, a quarterback should probably be able to run any offense. Like the staple of a good quarterback should be, give me an offensive playbook, let me memorize it, and I'll go execute it. So that is not as good of an argument, in my opinion, for me, but that's just the truth. And the problem with that, and the reason why that is the truth, though, is because he had a coach who had basically, he was checked out. Let's be honest. Like, I think they tried the Chip Kelly experiment thinking that he was the same Chip Kelly at Oregon, and he's just not. And it's not necessarily a bad thing because of how well Chip Kelly did at Ohio State. But Chip Kelly is very kind of stubborn and picky. So, and by that, especially after he left Oregon, his time at Oregon kind of gave him options on options on options. So I think he was like, UCLA isn't working for me. I'm going to coach as long as I need to leave, and I'm out. Because Chip Kelly was the type of guy, he did eventually sort of adapt his playbook from the Oregon era because everyone was sort of figuring out that offense. And so he had to adapt because everyone was adapting to him. So it wasn't, and that probably took a while too, because again, he's kind of stubborn. I want you to play for my system. That's why he was a notoriously not as great recruiter as he probably could have been. And why Oregon, after Chip Kelly, focused on guys who could recruit. Because he was like, no, I don't really care about anything other than you playing in my system. And that's the system, and we're going to stick to it. Um, I think that's sort of what took out Mark Helfrich too, because he was basically trying to be Chip Kelly, and he's just not Chip Kelly. And so he was being stubborn at times they shouldn't have been stubborn in, and it didn't work out. But that's not neither here nor there. But so with Dante though, he's in an environment that was kind of originally meant for him, because he had committed to Oregon, then flipped to UCLA and came back. So the thing is they're not going to change the playbook necessarily, but they're going to change the play calling that will help benefit more the most. But they're also going to develop him and coach him up and get rid of those freshman mistakes. So we're going to see Dante as a starter against Montana State, and hopefully with a little bit of pushback. But hopefully it'll give us the idea of what he'll look like as a starter. And that will be sort of the test for him for this game. Obviously, as the weeks go by, that's when you really, really, really want to see how he'll be, because the difference between a good quarterback, a great quarterback, and even an elite champion quarterback, that gap jumps higher and higher each level you get. So good quarterbacks, winning season, bowl game win, whatever, great. He deserves that spot as a starter and deserves the accolades he's been. Then a great quarterback, you have a guy who competes, maybe steps up the program. That's great, right? And then you have elite champion quarterbacks. Elite champion quarterbacks have to be the guy. And being the guy means no matter the pressure, I don't care if it's 3 seconds left in the game against the number one team, you're on the road. All right, I apologize for the jump cut. My voice, I don't know what's going on. It is quite shot. I've been losing it really fast lately. I don't know what's going on. But anyway, continuing the thought about championship level quarterbacks. Pressure's on, 3 seconds left, on the road against the number one team, or you're in the playoff, let's say, and you're headed towards the championship game. You got to be the guy to make that play. So we're not going to see what Dante Moore is capable of until time goes on, and that's fine. The bottom line of everything is I'm excited to see how it goes, because he's taken his training seriously. He's been trying to get faster running, and he has, very much so, apparently. And he's a gunslinger, though. The thing with him is that you might see, he's still going to be efficient, but you might see more risky throws and maybe more interceptions, but certainly more risky throws. And here's why, though, because when I'm super good at something, I take more risks. So, let me try to do this. Let me try to do that. Let me try. With Dante Moore, he has such amazing accuracy, and he just throws frozen ropes for, a quarterback. His spirals are super tight. He can fit into so many windows, just about any window. Well, in his brain, he's like, oh, I can make that throw, so I'm going to throw it. So, again, that can be good or bad. And the way that you make it good is impacting his decisions and saying, in this way, if you think you can make that throw, then make the throw. Don't even hesitate. Just do it. In this situation, if you think you can make that throw, maybe don't. and live to see another down, so on and so forth. So I'm excited though. I'm excited to see that. I'm not going to make a score prediction or anything because it's like, what's the point? No one's ever really right. So it's like, what do you get? And then if you are right, then the one of a millionth time, it's like, no one gives you money for it, I guess, unless you bet on the score. But even then, you don't even bet for getting right. You bet for getting close, hitting the over under. I guess some point of concern, speaking of the gambling, is that Oregon did move down to a 9.5 over under game or winning games won for the season, which means that they might have seen something in another team where they're better than they think, and might present a trap game to Oregon. But let's actually tease that for the next round of episodes here on the show. Let's tease that for next time. And we will do a recap of the game that had been played against Montana State. Hopefully it'll be a fun recap and Oregon will have won. I don't really think they're going to lose, but like I said, sometimes you just never know. And that's why you play the games. But bottom line is we're going to do a recap of that game and we will do a look forward to the Oklahoma State game. I believe Oklahoma State and then Northwestern, then Oregon State. I don't think Northwestern's second week. I think they're third. But let's do that. So we will do a recap of the game and of the game just played, say all of our likes, all of our dislikes, and then we will do it live. So then everyone in the chat can comment below and tell me all their thoughts and feelings, and we will do a discussion on that. And we will then look forward in the schedule and look at some potential trap games that may have gone from that have made Oregon drop from 10.5 to 9.5 on the money line. So we will see which team it might be or might not be, but we're not going to make the prediction. We're just going to do sort of an analysis of who it could be. Here's why this team could be. Here's why this team could not be. Because, again, every team could be. And we will then look at why. Because I also plan on watching other games in college football tomorrow, obviously, like everyone else does. You look at the rest of the thing because it's just an all-around good time. College football is amazing. I personally think it's better than the NFL. And unfortunately, the amount of commercials has gone up to NFL levels in college football, but the love and the atmosphere for college football is still there. And so I look forward to it. I look forward to watching all the games as much as possible. But the Ducks obviously rule over all when it comes to that. So for now, that will be all. And until next time. Oh, yeah, one more thing. This will be a PS video at the end. I understand that the last week's episode was off on the audio. Apparently, the update that happened on my Streamlabs, and it updates automatically when you're hooked up to the internet. The new update messed it up. Apparently, this is a problem for Mac users on the Streamlabs platform. For some reason, it just messes up the audio, makes it sound terrible. I tried troubleshooting everything, and I finally looked it up and was informed of that. Luckily, I think for the most part, I'll say 90 to 95% of the show audio-wise was good enough that I think the message got across. And so I understand, though, it was sort of hard for me to listen to myself because I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I understand if maybe it wasn't good for you. I have figured out the patch or the workflow, how to go around that for now. So my app doesn't automatically update. That is a rant for another time on why that makes me angry, these tech companies. That is for another time. But bottom line is I figured out a workaround, and hopefully the audio has gotten better. And once I find out and confirm that the streaming platform has actually fixed it, and if you update, it won't unfix it, then I'll update. But I don't think it really did anything. The update obviously isn't necessary other than going back on the update and actually having good audio for a Mac user. So I understand. I heard it. I understand that last week's audio wasn't great. There was a reason for it. I found the reason, and it has been figured out. So thank you.